Now, I want to look at a poem that I quoted in the last video, but that I think really encapsulates the things that Sylvia Plath does best. So this is a poem called Fever 103, and this is from her collection Ariel, which was her final poetry collection. She really only published 2 collections in her lifetime. First, The Colossus in the early 1960s, which was mostly in free verse, but kind of showed a young poet at the height of her powers. Plath famously, though she was American, she got a Fulbright scholarship and went and studied in England and ended up connecting with the British poet Ted Hughes. They had a whirlwind romance. They got married. They had a couple kids. Hughes was unfaithful and ended up leaving her. And in the last year of her life, Plath wrote a series of poems that became the collection Ariel. She took her own life, and then the poems were published. And in fact, they were edited and published by her ex-husband, Ted Hughes. So very dramatic, there's a lot of drama surrounding their relationship, and grudges are still held to this day about how Ted Hughes treated Sylvia Plath. And when we read the poems that she wrote in the last year of her life that are collected in Ariel, we see a lot of the passion and angst. So this is Fever 103, or Fever 103 degrees. Pure, what does it mean? The tongues of hell are dull, dull as the triple tongues of dull, fat Kerberos, who wheezes at the gate, incapable of licking clean the ague tendon, the sin, the tinder cries, the indelible smell of a snuffed candle. Love, love, the low smokes roll for me like Isidora's scarves, and I'm in a fright. One scarf will catch and anchor in the wheel. Such yellow, sullen smokes make their own element. They will not rise, but trundle round the globe, choking the aged and meek, the weak. Hothouse baby in its crib, the ghastly orchid hanging its hanging garden in the air, devilish leopard. Radiation turned it white and killed it an hour ago, greasing the bodies of adulterers like the Hiroshima ash and eating in the sin, the sin. Darling, all night I have been flickering off, on. The sheets grow heavy as a lecher's kiss. 3 days, 3 nights, lemon water, chicken, water make me wretch. I am too pure for you or anyone. Your body hurts me as the world hurts God. I am a lantern, my head a moon of Japanese paper, my gold-beaten skin infinitely delicate and infinitely expensive. Does not my heat astound you, and my light? All by myself I am a huge camellia, glowing and coming and going flush on flush. I think I'm going up. I think I may rise. The beads of hot metal fly, and I am a pure acetylene virgin, attended by roses, by kisses, by cherubim, by whatever these pink things mean. Not you, nor him, nor him, nor him, myselves dissolving old whore petticoats to paradise. There is a lot going on in this poem, and I want to start by talking a little bit about the form. Now, free verse is the hallmark of this era of American poetry, especially of the confessional voice and movement in American poetry. I've been reading from the typescript that we have from Sylvia Plath herself, and as you can see, the poem is broken into stanzas of 3 lines each. Now, the 3 lines, they're not all the same length as each other. They don't match in meter or length. And yet it's always 3 lines, or we would call these tercet stanzas. And you can see that she's often playing with rhyme in them. We have in the at the bottom of the first page, the stanza is, greasing the bodies of adulterers like Hiroshima ash and eating in. In is the end of the second line. The sin is the third line. So we have this in sin rhyme. So we have an end rhyme in the second and third lines. And we have that a couple times. And I think it's interesting that she's using this, rhyming couplet at the end of a stanza, which is very conventional, but she's doing it in free verse lines where there's not a matching pattern of unstressed and stressed syllables. We see this again in but trundle round the globe, line 1 of the stanza, choking the aged and meek, line 2 of the stanza, the weak, line 3 of the stanza. So often the last line will be shorter and will rhyme with the second line, but not always. We have a stanza later in the poem, my head a moon, line 1, of Japanese paper my gold-beaten skin, line 2, and then line 3, infinitely delicate and infinitely expensive. That's the longest line. It doesn't metrically match either of the other two lines, and even the types of words she's using, infinitely delicate, infinitely expensive, those are long Latin-based words, whereas before we had my head a moon, very short words, my gold-beaten skin, short words, borrowing more from Anglo-Saxon, and using terms that aren't technical, like infinitely. So she's juxtaposing short and long lines, she's juxtaposing different types of language. What's the poem about, though? Well, it's called Fever 103 Degrees, and we keep having these images that help us get a sense for what someone who has a high fever is feeling. We have ideas at the very beginning of purity. Pure, what does it mean? Heat purifies. But immediately then in the second line of the first stanza, the tongues of hell are dull. So we have heat as purifying. Oh no, heat as hellish. And in fact, the hell imagery continues for almost the full first half of the poem. We have the triple tongues of dull fat Kerberos, the three-headed dog who guards the Greek underworld. We have low smokes rolling, they will not rise but trundle round the globe. We have the sense of lowness. We have smoke, we have flame, we have heat. The hothouse baby in its crib, the ghastly orchid. These are images of low, suffocating heat. And then we get even into more World War II imagery, radiation, Hiroshima ash, not only images of lowness and heat, but of mass death, of the genocide and the tragedy at a worldwide scale of World War II. And, we mentioned in the last video that the confessionals are very aware of the trauma experienced all around the globe by the Second World War. And we get this here in particular. We have this ethical dimension, the sin, it's actually repeated a couple times in the poem. But then in the second half of the poem, we move from a hellish vision of the classical underworld and a hellish vision of history into images of rising, images of light. I am too pure for you or anyone. I am a lantern, my head a moon of Japanese paper, my gold-beaten skin. All of a sudden we have more luminous, less hot and suffocating imagery. The moon is something high. And then we have, does not my heat astound you, and my light, I am a huge camellia, glowing and going and coming flush on flush. All of a sudden, there's this sort of radiating, beautiful, almost overwhelmingly aesthetically positive imagery of the fever. And then we have this sort of apotheosis at the end. I am going up, I may rise, the beads of hot metal fly, I am a pure acetylene virgin, attended by roses. Virgin attended by roses. That's a description that we would think of as describing an image of Mary, especially of Mary's assumption into heaven in traditional Christian iconography. By kisses, by cherubim. And then we have this very Plathy line, by whatever these pink things mean. Are those flowers? What are those? It's like she's not even quite sure what to say. She knows there should be pink things around this person being caught up into heaven. And then she has this sort of, she's pushing away all others, and herself only is going to heaven. Not you, nor him, nor him, nor him. Myselves dissolving, old whore petticoats, to paradise. This sort of pushing off of the sinful self of these old identities. And then paradise is the last word. I think it's intentional that hell is used in the first stanza of the poem and that paradise ends the poem. We have ideas of purity at the beginning and end. And we have pure, what does it mean? Like, what would it even mean to be purified is a question. And then we go into the hellish imagery, but by the end, we have this ideas of beads of hot metal flying. We have this purification of metal, this getting rid of dross, getting rid of the cells, getting rid of the sinful trappings of this world. So I think Sylvia Plath is a poet who can sometimes annoy by her melodrama, and yet she can also intoxicate by her melodrama. This is a poem that's ostensibly about having a fever, and yet it uses classical imagery, it uses biblical imagery, it uses historical 20th century imagery to explore the experience of having a fever, and it transposes that experience into a vision of ethical purification and of ascendance toward paradise. It's a lot to do in 2 pages of free verse poetry. Sylvia Plath accomplishes it. And I hope you've begun to see a little bit of what is going on in Plath and the confessional poets and why we might be interested in reading and thinking about her. Thanks so much.